The problem that our coast is trying to solve is a global one. We have 22,000 miles of coastlines that are actively eroding. That is projected to increase to 60,000 miles. We have $9.5 trillion generated from coastal counties, and that's in the US alone. It's not a local problem, but it's a global problem. So, yeah, our problem, like climate adaptation problem that we're trying to solve is giving people the intelligence they need to be able to adapt to coastal change and to build pathways where it's financially feasible for a community or an individual to adapt. We have 1 billion people living in vulnerable zones on our coastlines around the world. So we have to act local, think global. And for the first time, we have the capability of collecting data of what people are doing, how people are adapting, and we have the ability to be able to learn from that data. So if one community is deploying X solution, we can now share that around the world. And that's something we've never really been able to do before. So the problem we are solving is adapting intelligently on our coastlines, um, helping communities know what their options are and sharing the successes and failures across communities and building new adaptation pathways for those communities. We really believe that when we work together, we can build a more resilient tomorrow. It's interesting to think about it as, unchecked climate change over time, because I think it implies and it's kind of ingrained in us that this is a future problem, except with coastal change and many climate change hazards, this is happening right now. We see this with wildfires, with increases in temperatures and grid systems not being able to handle that. But on the coast, what that's manifesting as are literal communities being displaced, like literally, physically, geographically moved from one spot to another. You have really interesting communities like Lagos, Nigeria, where they are like partial water world. I mean, it is really cool to see what they've done. Now they have water taxis. Local kids in the community that go out and they escort people around. Um, but what we also have are things like Buxton, North Carolina, where we are down 19 houses in that one community. And um, so what happened in Buxton was pretty surprising because we knew it was going to happen. We knew it was only a matter of time. Academics, scientists, they all saw that coming. And we kind of had decision paralysis at the federal, state, local level, and community members that didn't know what to do. The result, so this is right now, were houses literally falling in to the ocean. Insurance companies won't write a check until the house has fallen. What that led to is 19 homes falling in about a 6-month time period, and that was blinds, glasses, forks, u septic tanks, all in the ocean right now. I've been working on this problem since I was an undergrad, but really, even as a kid, I was fascinated by coastal change. The beach where I caught my first fish with my dad has eroded away. So it's always been something that's just on my mind. It's something I'm extremely interested in. I, because I got just so fascinated with this problem, I started like collecting all the data that I could. I learned how to collect data as an undergrad student. Then I did a master's collecting more data on our beaches. And I've always been on the recovery side. So, how do dunes build? How do we recover from a storm? Um, and, you know, I like what happened was when I was really starting to get into this, I started building my own instruments because we didn't have the instruments to capture the data we needed. So I built the first sensor to be able to separate different types of particle motion for windblown sand. And that's the fundamental mechanism for how dunes build. I built the world's first, which it's going to be a mouthful, but it's the world's first particle tracking velocimetry system to be deployed in a field environment on a beach. And we measured for the first time turbulence at a super, super fine level. So there's still so much that we need data wise, um, that I've just spent my entire career being a data person, from building the sensors to analyzing the data to writing code and to be able to translate that data and learn from that data. So it only makes sense that I built a data company where I'm building the data set that we need. So our solution, what RCOAST is doing is we are collecting data of all of the different mitigation strategies that are being deployed to reduce coastal erosion right now. And that can be 3D printed core reefs that are being developed, or it can be simple sand fencing that's being deployed. It can be vegetation that's being planted. It can be big beach nourishment projects. There's also all these new living shorelines that are popping up everywhere, and they can be used in a number of different environments. Um, so the number of new innovative solutions, in addition to the old school solutions, it's only increasing. And that's a really exciting moment to be in time. And it's 100% a response to the urgency of this problem. So what we do is we measure the performance of those different types of mitigation deployed in different types of environments. And when I say environments, I mean those solutions deployed in places that are sandy barrier islands or are marsh dominated environments or mainland beaches or rocky coast. So we collect the data of how each of these mitigation solutions perform in different environments. And then we're training a machine learner to literally learn to tell us information that we can't, as a single human, comprehend. So we're learning from those data sets so that we can then ask that data set questions. Hey, here's a new area. This is the type of geologic setting it has. This is its local wind, waves, and tides. And this is the budget that they have. Tell me the best solution. So that's what RCOAST is doing. We're building a database and we're training a machine learner so that we can ask that database questions about how best to adapt. So our customers are local and state governments. We've been funded directly through the state. We've been funded directly from municipalities. We also work for large homeowners associations or community associations. We work for NGOs who work on behalf of communities that can't afford it or are disadvantaged in some way. So we're really focused on that neighborhood scale resilience. And, you know, to answer the question about if they're willing to pay for it, they are already paying for it, especially when a community looks at what's happening to Buxton and their property is at risk. Um, Also, those local communities, they generate tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of million, in tax revenue. So what's at stake here is massively financial, and people are already paying for it. The interesting thing is that there's usually only one, like communities don't know what to do, so they turn to an engineering firm most often and ask them, "Okay, what do we do?" And then the engineering firm says, "All right, well, I'm gonna charge you to tell you how bad your erosion problem is. I'm gonna charge you to for me to tell you what the solutions are, and then I'm gonna say, 'Oh, look at that. We can do the solution, so then I'm gonna charge you to solve your problem.'" So there's really no incentive for engineering firms to be able to try to reduce costs. Um, this is a big problem because that means we have biased intelligence versus neutral intelligence. At the state and federal level, we're spending massive amounts of taxpayer dollars just trying to figure out what best to do. And we have to figure this out in a better way than what we're doing right now. The hardest part to explain is usually how we learn from our data. And it's my favorite thing to really talk about and think about, but I don't get to talk about it as much as I want to. So I'm glad I get this question. So imagine each new area that we're scanning. Let's say it's Buxton, North Carolina, South Padre Island, Texas, Amelia Island, Florida, um, somewhere in Portugal, somewhere in Australia, somewhere in Southeast Asia. Just imagine all these different coastal places. Imagine they look different and they have different winds and waves and tides. All of that is true. They all look different and they have different wind, waves, and tides. But with all of our coastlines around the world, there are these patterns that emerge. So what we do is we build data cakes for each of those locations. And I have to credit my colleague Evan Goldstein with helping me see this as data cakes. But essentially, the data we collect is for any individual location is, tons of information that's geospatial. So that's the bottom layers of the cake. Then we can add the winds, waves, and tides. So all the things acting on the cake to make it erode. And then our data, so our coast data, which is proprietary and it's LiDAR, it's RGB, it's multispectral, and we're collapsing time and adding that as a layer. And so then we put all of those data cakes into a space where they start learning and talking to each other. And then from that, we can start predicting. We have a ton of different things that we absolutely have to get right. And we have validation metrics that we have to be able to predict to. So all that's being developed right now, and we're really excited about it. You know, we I started this company really in 2023. It's when I left the Naval Research Lab to go full-time RCOAST. It was late spring 2023. And I essentially didn't pay myself for the first 2 years. And that was extremely hard, especially just, but just not getting paid is really difficult. And I knew that to build the company that I wanted to build, to build a scalable company, that I would need investor funding. And having to split my time with very few people between building a solid foundation for the company, talking to customers and getting traction, and then getting investor funding and balancing investor relations, that's like 3 full-time jobs, and you're not getting paid. And when you're raising money and you're trying to get investor funding, one, there is a lot of education that I have to do about the coastal erosion problem. Um, but really it's the no's. It's because anyone raising money, well, maybe not anyone, but most people that are raising money hear far more no's than yeses. And you have to really find your right investors. And so we've been offered funding and it just wasn't a good fit for us. So we didn't take funding in some cases. So it's just, you know, trying to figure out like how to keep going when you just had your 20th call of someone saying no, or you spent months in due diligence and then, the investor that you built this awesome relationship with and that you respect so much says no. It's just hard to keep going. But I I genuinely believe in this problem. It's what wakes me up in the morning and I'm pretty addicted to it. Well, when you talk about climate adaptation, you immediately to a group of people around the world get skeptics in your area because people think that the climate isn't changing. And so you have to learn how to, navigate those conversations. And the thing that I like to remind people, and I wish I would have been able to articulate earlier, is that just because our climate is changing doesn't mean that it's challenging someone's political belief. And we've been changing, humans change, like our environment changes. We all are changing. So we are just experiencing this change right now that is extremely costly. So being able to really demonstrate that change isn't negative, change is something that happens. It's a natural process. Whether you think that's accelerated by humans or not is a moot point because this is where we are. Um, So being able to articulate that and respect someone's opinion that they have, that might not be in line with yours is a valuable lesson. Also, with investors and trying to raise money, if you're in climate adaptation tech, you're going to find your right champions. So don't sweat the nose. Just keep going because you really are going to find those people who believe in what you're doing. So I see a lot of, you know, funding in the wildfire area right now because it's dominating the news. Um, I think that, I mean, sadly, I think that's a good thing for wildfires because we need to mitigate that. I also see a lot of money flowing into AI and data companies. And so that's really important because I do believe AI has a massive grip on our future, whether we want it to or not. And we should take advantage of this incredible opportunity and time. So that's exciting for me that funding is being put into that. I think what I would like to see more funding flow to is coastal erosion problems, 100%, but also um, data, like funding to truly get good data because our AI models are literally only as good as the data and how you treat that data. Raw data is often not going into these models. You have to do something with that data at the for the type of work that we are doing. There are some, deep learning ways and there are methods, but right now you have to create data derivatives to be able to know how to interpret, how to ask it questions. And so I would love to see more funding and more investors in this space where they truly understand how to capture and create your own proprietary databases, how to fund and understand timelines for funding data derivative products that are needed for AI products, and also how to validate and build time in for the validation piece. A machine learner will predict something, but you have to make sure that you're validating it and you have to make sure that what you're predicting makes sense. I really believe in this transition from us being a reactive society on our coast, but also to other climate adaptation hazards as well. Um, so, transition from reactive to proactive, where we are actually building smarter years, decades in advance to the problem. And we're not waiting until it's too late for us to act, where we are burning more money by the day. And we're, having environmental degradation be a byproduct of that. So I really do believe that it's possible now for us to transition our society, but we've got to have the money and the people willing to do it. I also there's this moment in time, and time just feels so elusive, but we are in this incredible moment in time where we have for the first time, we're able to, like, collect big data. So I could initialize a bunch of drone pilots around the world right now, and we can collect data right now. That is net we've never been able to do that. We can now transfer that data. So we can send data, we can do all kinds of stuff, we can back it up, we can whatever. But now with AI, we can learn from all that data. That is creating such an inflection point. That is the foundational, most exciting piece of my company, but also just this moment in time. If my company doesn't do it, someone else's will, where we actually transition from local knowledge, that old adage of like local, think local, act global, or act local, think global. It's here. We can scale things now. And I could not be more excited about being in that moment.